The deer gun season in North Dakota opens Friday, November 7th at noon Central Time. Today we're visiting with Wildlife Division Chief Bill Haase to go over all the details. I'm Mike Anderson with the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. Bill, deer gun hunting in North Dakota is a popular family tradition.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, year after year, we see a lot of applicants applying for our gun licenses. And again, this year we had over 70,000 people applying for a little over 42,000 licenses. So a lot of demand.
Bill, licenses are down this year. Game and Fish has taken a conservative approach. Why is that?
Yeah, we really are. And we're still our population is recovering from that tough winter that we had a couple years ago in the central and southwestern part of the state. We had that really bad EHD die off. And for deer, it takes a while to recover. I mean, it's not like a pheasant that has a brood of 10 chicks, you know. They might have 1 or 2, possibly 3 fawns, but that would be unlikely. So it just takes a lot of years of good production. Luckily, we've had easy winters, but you know, there's been some drought along the way, and habitat conditions in the eastern part of the state aren't the best. And so all those factors certainly have slowed the recovery. So yeah, we issue licenses through deer units, and that's how we survey those, whether we're doing aerial surveys in the winter, surveys of hunters, or how we derive our information to determine how many licenses we'll issue. In that eastern part of the state, there's some units where we actually we didn't issue any antlerless whitetail deer licenses, or very few.
We've lost over 2 million acres of CRP in the last decade.
Yeah.
That certainly has an effect on the rebound for deer.
It really does, and you could see it if you drive through the eastern part of the state. You know, there's just less habitat on the landscape. You know, a lot of tree rows being removed. You see wetlands that appear to be drained, and less idle grass on the landscape. And when we did issue less licenses, we really focused on those antlerless licenses, really trying to allow that population to rebuild with antlerless deer.
Bill, let's talk whitetail deer populations.
Okay.
Of course, a couple years ago, bad winter,
Yeah.
EHD, not CWD, EHD outbreak in Southwest and Central and North Central. How are whitetail deer numbers doing?
Yeah, so whitetail deer numbers, I would say west of the Missouri River are low, but there's still, you know, a fair number of deer out there. If you look at the northwest part of the state, deer are actually doing pretty well up there. That's probably our bright spot. As you go east, a little bit lower population still. You know, where there's habitat though, there's deer. And when you're on the landscape and you see that, you can find deer, you certainly can, but it's sometimes in pockets and it's not widespread throughout the landscape.
How about mule deer numbers? You guys are flying, your big game biologists currently are flying the fall mule deer survey, but how are they looking in the state?
Yeah, so we do fly those badland units each spring and each fall, so we have a really good gauge of where that population's doing. So this last spring, unfortunately, the population was down about 12%, and the reason was just for really poor fawn production, unfortunately, and that's kind of been a trend that we've seen over the last number of years. And so if we can have some better fawn production, we're going to start to see that bump, and we'll get a little better understanding after we do fly those mule deer surveys. And like I said, we're right in the middle of it, just only flown a few units at this point, and seeing some units good, some down a little bit, and that's probably what it'll be. It'll be variable throughout the landscape, but really hoping that they can see a little bump in the population for the Badlands units. As we move outside those traditional Badlands units, we're seeing a pretty good mule deer population, which is exciting, you know, and there's some big bucks on the landscape as well. And this last year, there's some legislative changes for the youth deer. So now youth hunters can, for the antler list, you know, for the 11, 12 to 15-year-olds, they can shoot mule deer or a whitetail deer outside those Badlands units, which is a change. It was always whitetail, and so that was a change that gives those youth another opportunity.
Bill, every year the Game and Fish Department focuses on a certain part of the state for chronic wasting disease testing.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Yeah, so we break the state up into quarters essentially for our CWD testing, and so this year we'll be in the northwest part of the state. And so we encourage any hunters that are in that northwest part, whether archery hunting, gun hunting, even muzzleloader. If you do harvest a deer in that northwest part of the state, if you could submit your sample, we'd really appreciate it. We'll have head collection sites scattered. You can find more information on our website. And if you're outside that unit, that northwest part of the state, we still will test that sample if you send it in, but you might have to drop that head off at one of our game fish offices, or you can get a self-sample kit on our website, and we'd certainly test statewide, but really focusing on the northwest, and then next year we'll be in the southwest part of the state.
Bill, what do we need for these deer numbers to head in the right direction?
For numbers to just continue to increase or start to, I'd say we've been increasing, but we want to see a bigger bump as we hope for good weather, and that's just not only in the winters. We want to have timely rains throughout the year. So I would say like this year was ideal conditions. Really green. Those deer are going to go into winter with really good fat reserves. So even if we do have a bit of a winter, they're going to be more likely to survive. Again, in the wintertime, that's a limiting factor for us. So hopefully we don't have too much snow and it's not too cold. And then as we move into spring, what do those fawning conditions look like? What's that habitat in the landscape so we can produce those fawns? And if all that starts to come together, that'll speed up that recovery. And so at the end of the day, the habitat is one of the keys. And so especially in that eastern third of the state, we really working hard to try to increase that habitat quality.
Deer gun season opens Friday, November 7th at noon Central Time.
Yeah.
What can deer hunters expect this fall?
Yeah, for those deer hunters that are lucky enough to draw a license this year, I think you're going to see fewer hunters. It is fewer licenses that we issued this year. So that is something, I guess, that is a little nicer, that you're going to have more space to roam and less competition. I think when you find quality habitat, you're going to find decent deer numbers. It'll be variable. Our population isn't as high as it's been in the past, but I think you're going to have a good experience.
A lot of great information, Bill.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.